Good afternoon, all, and welcome to Grave Conversations Pine Hill Cemetery Veterans Speak, presented by the Friends of Pine Hill Cemetery. Throughout this tour, you will meet 8 honored military veterans laid to rest here as they recount their time in service and the sacrifices they made for our freedom.
Before we introduce you to these veterans, we'd like to tell you a bit about this historic cemetery. In 1842, Westfield was the largest community west of the Connecticut River. The old burying ground on Mechanic Street, which has been used by the town since the 1600s, was almost full.
That same year, the city paid just $500 to purchase this land, and Pine Hill was created. Though the city paid for it, Pine Hill would be established as a private, not-for-profit cemetery run by a board of directors. This was Westfield's first non-denominational cemetery, open to people of all faiths or no faith, offering burial services without religious restriction.
So come along with us as we meet some of our heroic veterans laid to rest here.
We're going to have you come right this way.
Hello. Welcome all.
Greetings, Mr. Ash. Glad to see you could pay us a visit today. Can you tell us a bit about yourself, sir?
Why, let's see. I was born in Ireland way back in 1841. So, I guess that makes me 184 years young. I came to the United States of America when I was 8 years young. So young I can barely remember. My memory might be foggy, but I believe it had something to do with the potato famine. It plagued Ireland and forced many of our good people out of our homes. Thousands of people, if not more, came for US for security and safety, but it wasn't exactly a welcoming place.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you see, over in Ireland, we were farmers. When we came to the US, we didn't have experience and skills. So many Irishmen like myself enlisted in the army for some sort of income, but it was more than just the money.
Can you tell us more about your military service?
I enlisted in the Massachusetts 9th Infantry, also known as the Irish Brigade. I was 19 years old.
And how was your time as a soldier?
Not great, to say the least. I was constantly, and I mean constantly, getting injured. My poor body is covered in scars, across my hip, down the length of my head, even on my skull. It really is a wonder I survived to be 67 years old. I fought in many battles of the Civil War and have the scars to prove it. In the Battle of Malvern Hill in 1862, I was severely wounded and was out of service for a couple of months to recover.
I can't imagine how difficult it is to continue to fight after seeing so much bloodshed, not to mention your own injuries.
I heard that there was a monument just south of Gettysburg dedicated to our infantry. It was built a few years after the battle and dedicated by the state of Massachusetts in our honor. It makes me very glad that the good men who lost their lives there are immortalized and respected in that way.
Well, that's lovely, but surely your own sacrifices meant that you earned some respect in your lifetime too, even if the Irish were so unliked in the time.
Actually, yes. I'm surprised to see it, but the newspapers described me as honorable and brave.
And rightfully so.
That is until they literally claimed that I died before I actually did.
Wait, what? How did that happen?
I was wounded in the Battle of Spotsylvania and taken as a prisoner of war by the Confederates in 1864. I was reported as being killed in action, and my family held a memorial service. Eesh. But I was still alive. But in an awful place called Libby Prison in Virginia until I was transferred during a prisoner exchange and Camp Parole in Maryland. A few months later I was discharged and still very much alive.
So what happened next?
When I was 25, I settled down and married my wife, Sarah Dixon. We wed in Portland, Maine with beautiful sunny weather. We had 9 children who we raised here in Westfield. We lived in town for the rest of our lives, and I died here at the ripe age of 67.
Well, thank you for your time, sir. It was an honor to hear your story.
Oh, it was my pleasure. It is truly a privilege to be laid rest here with my fellow veterans from the Civil War.
Thank you for your service, Mr. Ash.
Thank Thank you very much.
Hello, Mrs. Cleo Frisbee.
Good afternoon. It is so nice to see you all on this beautiful day. What is the occasion?
Well, we were hoping to learn a little bit about the incredible life you've lived.
Oh, well, sure. I don't know if you would call it incredible, but I'll happily answer any questions you have.
Oh, don't be modest, Mrs. Frisbee. Weren't you a World War II nurse? That is so brave.
Yes, it was. After I had graduated from Lewis Gale Hospital School of Nursing in my home state of Virginia, I joined the United States Army as a nurse. In 1944, I was just 24 years old, and I had enlisted alongside 300 other men and women as part of the 107th Evacuation Hospital.
And where were you stationed?
We trained here in the United States, making sure we could pack up, relocate, and get all set up with our equipment and about 400 hospital beds before traveling overseas. We had to be ready for anything, and a quick setup could be the difference between life and death for some of the soldiers. But we were ready and boarded the Susan B. Anthony, a cramped ship that took us to England in February of 1944. After the successful Allied D-Day invasion, we mobilized in France, Belgium, and of course, Germany. Our hospital was set on the worst conditions of harsh winters, deep mud, and more. Occasionally, we got to operate out of a school or even an orphanage. No matter where we were, we had to be ready to aid 2,500 or more soldiers every month.
Wow, I can't imagine what that must have been like for you. Were there any specific battles that stand out in your memory?
Yes, actually, on a cold December day, the German forces attacked once more. Hitler's forces had attacked in the Ardennes forest, which spanned 75 miles. They had broken through our defenses and pushed inwards, giving it the name the Battle of the Bulge. Countless soldiers and even civilians were massacred in this gruesome battle.
And how did you handle the emotional toll of witnessing the violence of war firsthand?
Oh, that was the worst part. No matter how horrible the conditions we faced, we all remained thankful that our bodies were not mutilated in the ways that the soldiers were. Soldiers had been reduced to a third of their body weight and so injured that they were forced to walk with canes for stability. We kept morale high because we had to. Otherwise, I'm not sure how we would have survived those 2 years.
How were you able to stay positive amidst such disaster?
Well, I can't speak for everyone in the 107th, but for me, it did help that I met the love of my life amidst the fighting and the bloodshed.
Did you two stay together after the war ended?
Actually, we got married in Germany.
You did? Where?
It was by no means a big showy ceremony, but it was perfect. Robert and I met while in service and started dating when we were in Wales in 1944. It was all anyone talked about. After the war in Europe was won on May 8, 1945, we had a beautiful July wedding at the Army Hospital Chapel, which was in the German hospital building in Würzburg, Germany.
That's amazing.
It was. Being surrounded by people you have come to love, even as friends, made it all a little easier. By early September, just a few months after the wedding, we were going home to start our lives together. I was done with the time as a war nurse. I got a job at Noble Hospital and eventually became the supervisor of nursing. Robert and I lived in Westfield together for 43 years and raised our 4 beautiful children together until I passed on April 9th, 1989.
Wow, what an impressive and heroic life you lived. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Mrs. Frisbee.
Well, I thank you all for listening. It is an honor to be buried here alongside my husband and a few other members of the 107th Unit who are laid to rest in this cemetery.
Thank you for your service. And folks, if you did not notice on your programs, Nancy is the niece of Cleo Frisbee. So it's very special that we have her with us today.
She was my aunt, and when they bought their house on Charles Street, then we all, my family and her family, all lived together for a couple of years.
So we think Nancy.
Pardon?
Cleo married a younger man.
Only by 3 years. My mother did the same thing.
Greetings all.
Hello, sir. You must be Edwin Lay.
Well, indeed I am. What a pleasure to meet you all this fine day.
Mr. Lay, we were hoping to learn a bit about your time as a Civil War soldier, if you have a few minutes to spare.
Well, I think that's a mighty fine idea. Let's see, I was 30 years old whenever I first enlisted into the Union Army. I was a member of the 2nd Massachusetts Heavy Artillery Unit for some time, and well, then about 6 months later, in January of 1865, I was transferred to the 17th Mass Infantry, which was an all-veterans regiment. And then about 6 months beyond that, the war ended, and I got to return home safely to my family. It was a lucky fate for which I have been forever grateful.
Wow, what battles were you a part of?
Well, I had the honor of being present at the largest Confederate surrender of the entire war. General Sherman himself forced them to surrender, while we had Raleigh surrounded on all sides. That moment marked a turning point for the Union Army, and it forced the South to fall.
It must be so cool to be a part of a major event in history.
Yes, the fame, the glory. Oh, but understand, it was not all so exciting. I mean, it was war after all. It was bloody. I may have been fortunate enough to return home safely, but well, that was not the case for many young men, my own family included.
I'm so sorry to hear this. Are they also resting here?
Well, my family's resting places are a bit scattered. My parents are here, along with many of my siblings. However, 2 of my brothers, James and Henry, well, they were both killed in the war. Our brother William, he was in the same company as James, but he was fortunate enough to survive. Yeah, James had told me that, beg your pardon, William had told me that James had been shot not just once, but twice during his final battle. He said that a shot went into his shoulder blade, through his lungs, and out the breast at his right side. He was carried to hospital. He survived about an hour and 3/4 after he was shot. I was reassured to learn that he felt no pain during these moments of his life, as he had been rendered senseless. All he had done was to obey orders to fall back, and well, they opened fire.
That's terrible. I'm so sorry for your loss. At least he's honored here, close to home.
It's funny you should say, because it's exactly why I had the statue constructed that I believe you had all just visited.
I thought it looked like you.
Well, it's not me. Not necessarily. I mean, he does have the same height and build as me, and Well, he sure is a handsome fellow, and well, sure, there are people that say that because he bears my likeness and because it was my finances that had the statue built, that it must be me, but it's not necessarily.
I always thought it was you.
Oh, pish posh, doesn't matter. But what matters is that I had the statue commissioned to honor James and Henry and well, all the brave young men who fought and were killed for the Grand Army of the Republic. It was for them that the statue honors. It's not me.
That is truly a beautiful way to honor these men and your brothers.
What were some of your accomplishments following your time in the Army?
Well, there was a church in Feeding Hills that my grandfather Gibbons Lay once frequented, and well, some years after it had been destroyed by fire, I personally financed the construction of a large sanctuary near the same location that eventually became known as the Lay Memorial Methodist Church. Outside the church, well, I was made an honorary member of the Hampshire-Hamden County Association of the Women's Relief Corps in 1910. And ever since my time in the military, I served as a member of the staff of the Grand Army of Massachusetts. Just because I was no longer an active soldier, that group still continued to remain my second family.
What a cool legacy to have.
Yes, it was. Thank you. And my legacy, well, and my namesake, continued through my only surviving son. My wife Harriet and I lost our second son, Frederick, but Edwin survived.
That must have been an emotional time for you and your loved ones. Thank you for sharing your story with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you for your service.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
Our next veteran is from the Navy Waves program and contributed a great deal to training our pilots during World War II.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Marianne Oakes Douglas. I was born on November 13th, 1923 in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Growing up, I was an excellent student and a pretty good athlete. And I loved to paint and draw, and I particularly liked downhill skiing and tennis. After high school, I attended Syracuse University, where I studied art for 1 year. After that, I transferred to Moravian College because it was closer to my home, and I pursued and earned a business degree, but I also studied art on the weekends.
So did you pursue a career in art?
Oh, not at first. It was 1944 and World War II was raging. So I answered the call to enlist. I joined the Navy Waves and was sent off to boot camp in New York. Shortly after that, I was stationed at Atlanta Naval Base, where I was one of the very few women chosen to be a link trainer instructor. This was a very important training tool, as it was the flight simulators, the original flight simulators, and I trained the pilots on this. Although I never flew myself, I became an expert trainer. I trained other trainers, and I lectured on the flight simulator. We had cockpits, like in a regular airplane, we had cockpits, and we were able to simulate flight conditions where we taught them how to fly at night. We were also able to create malfunction conditions, which were very helpful in training the pilots. We also taught them how to do night flying and how to fly in bad weather.
Wow, is the link trainer still used today?
Yes, it is. And an updated version was used by the astronauts for the Apollo mission to the moon. I was honorably discharged in 1946 from the U.S. Navy as a specialist second-class link teacher. I met my husband, Dick Douglas, who was a Navy reservist training to be a surgeon. We got married in Beaufort, North Carolina. And after that, we decided to move back to Westfield because that's where Dick was from, and his father had a medical practice here. That medical practice was located right here on Court Street in the old white building with the columns where NetLogix is now located. I helped in Dick's office while I volunteered in various community activities, being the American Cancer Society, the Red Cross, the Shirtlet Children's Society, and I was also president of the Women's Auxiliary at Noble Hospital. We loved to sail, ski, and play tennis. We also raised German Shepherds and Shetland sheepdogs. And we loved spending time at our summer home in Blue Hill, Maine.
What about your interest in art?
Oh, I still continue to pursue my art love. In fact, I had my own studio in a barn in our backyard in Westfield. I displayed my art in many shows and was also honored to be inducted into the American Impressionist Art Society. I have many pieces displayed at the Westfield Athenaeum, and since we had no children, my nieces and nephews have many of my works of art. I died in April of 2011, and I'm buried here beside my husband, Dick.
Thank you, Marianne, for sharing your story with us, and thank you for your service.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Webb. We were hoping you could share some details about your life and time as a Civil War soldier.
Yes, it would be my pleasure. I was born in Lyme, New Hampshire. I enlisted into the 11th New Hampshire Infantry and stayed with them for 2 years. We fought in many battles over those years, including the Battle of the Wilderness.
And what happened in that battle?
It was if I can recall, it was fought in a dark, tangled forest in northern Virginia. It was effectively a tragedy, since we lost 17,500 casualties over the course of 2 days for inconclusive results. We fought because General Grant was planning an offensive attack on Richmond, which is the Confederate capital. His tactic was to distract and occupy General Lee's forces with attacks in northern Virginia. The deadly battle was fought, and despite neither side winning, General Grant pushed forward towards Richmond.
That must have been difficult on morale for your troops.
Yes, it was. And many of us, including myself, were injured during that battle. After a month, in June of 1865, I was transferred to the 10th Veteran Reserve Corps. This was the result of a decision in April of 1863, which said that men wounded in battle could be transferred to the Invalid Corps and divided into 2 groups based on the severity of their injuries. But these Invalid Corps were mocked and met with humiliation. We were seen as cowards. They'd eventually switched the name from Invalid Corps to the Veteran Reserve Corps to minimize the stigma, and we were given navy blue uniforms as opposed to the sky blue ones we were originally given.
That's awful.
Yes, but I do have a fascinating story from my time here.
We would love to hear it. Were you still on the front lines?
Not exactly. I was present in Washington, D.C. on April 14th, 1865, when President Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. As a member of the Veteran Reserve Corps, I served as a guard on rotation at the old Capitol Prison, where the assassination was attempted, or where the assassination conspirators were held. I stood guard over a woman named Mary Surratt for 3 days.
Her name sounds familiar.
She ended up being the first woman to be executed by the federal government. On July 7th, 1865, she was hanged alongside others who were believed to be involved with Booth and the assassination of President Lincoln. I was discharged from the Army just a week before this took place.
Oh my gosh, why was she killed?
The details are a bit unclear, if I'm being honest. All I know is that she owned a boarding house, which became a place where Confederate supporters met to conspire their assassination plot and she was given a package to deliver, which she claimed she did not know contained firearms.
Well, you said you were discharged, so what happened after that?
I went home to New Hampshire and married my wife, Laura Stark. We eventually moved to Westfield and then to Pittsfield, where we lived together until her passing. I got remarried in Springfield to a wonderful woman named Lucinda White. I never had any children with either of my loves, but I was an uncle to many nieces and nephews since I was one of 7 siblings. I passed in 1924.
Wow, you lived for such a long time after the war.
Yes, I was lucky to be granted 59 more years of life.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing your story with us today.
It was my pleasure.
And thank you for your service, Mr. Webb.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, I am Louise Toombs.
We were hoping you could tell us a bit about yourself, especially your time and involvement in World War II, if you have some time to spare.
I do. I would be more than happy to. You know, it wasn't always the case that women could be part of a war like this.
And how were you able to enlist?
Well, in 1943, Congress passed the Women's Armed Services Inauguration Act. This act laid the foundation for women to enlist and made women a permanent part of the regular Marine Corps. After this, more and more women, myself included, were able to contribute to the war efforts. It was exhilarating. 3 days after the act was passed, I enlisted. I signed myself up for the Marine Corps Women's Reserve.
Wow, you didn't waste any time.
Nope, I was eager to help however I could.
And were you fighting on the front lines?
No, I did not go overseas. See, part of the reason Congress was excited to have women enlist was to free up men to fight. The odd jobs, but very important jobs, were left for the women.
What was your role?
I was an aerial photographer, meaning just what it sounds like. We photographed from the sky to map territory and photographed the landscapes for mapping and defense planning purposes. We had heavy equipment to work with, but I got some really good shots to aid the war efforts.
At least that meant you weren't in any danger, right?
Well, it was a global conflict, so everywhere was dangerous, but you're right, it was not nearly as immediate as being at the forefront of the battles. I was stationed in Cherry Point, North Carolina, and insisted in training other Marines on the equipment before they went overseas. The crews were able to capture some breathtaking images of natural landscapes before they became riddled with the scars of battle.
What did you do after the war?
Well, after I was discharged in 1945, I came back home to Westfield, married my husband, Dr. Herbert Toombs, and worked with him in his medical practice. In my spare time, I practiced my oil painting. I made quite a few landscapes which were based on the scenery of Westfield. I started painting in high school and fell in love with the art form. And after the war, I was able to showcase my art just up the road at Stanley Park.
And what else did you do after the war ended?
Well, I was a member of the Noble Hospital Auxiliary just down the street and a corporator of the Westfield Athenaeum. I was also a member of the Western Hamden Historical Society for some time. My husband and I never had any children, so I devoted much of my time to my nieces and nephews and giving back to my community.
Well, it sounds like you had a very full life.
Why, yes, I did. I lived to be 70 years old.
Thank you for sharing your story with us today.
Oh, my pleasure.
And thank you for your service, Mrs. Toombs.
Thank you.
Hi, welcome. Welcome. Hey, come closer towards my family, please. Come closer.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Mitchell.
Oh, please, call me Eva. Now, I hear that you are looking to learn a little bit about us folks who reside in the cemetery.
Yes, ma'am. Could you tell us a little bit more about your time in World War I?
Certainly, but let's start at the beginning. I was born in 1889 in Chester, Massachusetts, and I graduated from Springfield Hospital Nursing School in 1912 at the age of 23. It was a couple years later, on August 6, 1917 actually, that I joined the U.S. Army Nursing Corps and trained in Fort Billings, Texas as a Red Cross nurse.
Wow, that's wonderful. Did you ever go overseas?
I did. The war officially ended on November 11th, 1918, but they still needed replacement nurses. So later that month, I boarded the Martha Washington and sailed to France. We were there for several months, and then I came back on the Leviathan in August 1919, 2 years the day that I enlisted. I was discharged a few weeks later.
And what was it like overseas?
Well, it is certainly not a topic I like to talk about, but what I can tell you is that we often did not have the necessary equipment we needed at our disposal. There was a major demand for skilled nurses, and we simply did not have the luxury of time to wait for supplies when the lives and well-being of soldiers were on the line. We did absolutely everything we could to provide care, even as the number of wounded soldiers continued to climb.
What sort of injuries did you treat?
We saw it all. We serviced around the clock for amputations, injuries from gas, gangrene, shell shock, disfigurements, and, of course, influenza.
Influenza? Was that a major issue?
Oh, absolutely. Known as the Spanish flu, many men carried the virus as they traveled overseas, leading to hundreds of cases and many, many unfortunate deaths. The disease arrived in France from American soldiers and quickly spread across the trenches to Germany and Austria.
How did you manage all those sick patients?
Not easily. Many American hospitals had separate influenza wards, separating the sick soldiers from the wounded soldiers. So some of them were able to return to fight, but many unfortunately lost their lives since antibiotics were not yet invented.
I'm sure the soldiers appreciated anything you could do for them. What did you do when you came back home?
I came back to West Springfield and became an active member of the Springfield Hospital Nurses Alumni Association, the American Legion Auxiliary of Westfield, and the American Red Cross. I also was involved with the Mittenegg Congregational Church in my hometown.
That's nice that you were still practicing nursing.
Yes, it was. I also married and started my family with a lovely man named Charles Root. We were married in 1921 and had 2 beautiful children, Shirley and Lyman. Shirley even went on to be a member of the U.S. Marine Women's Reserve in World War II.
She must have been inspired by you.
Oh, I do hope so, and I am so very proud of her. She, along with her father, are also laid to rest here, and I love having them so close to me. My dear Charles was only 50 when he passed, so young.
Did you ever remarry?
I did, yes. In 1941, I married Walter Howard Mitchell, and we lived a quiet, happy life until his passing in 1955. I lived to be 77 years old and was grateful for every minute.
Thank you for sharing your story with us
Thank
today.
you. It was very nice to meet you all.
And thank you for your service, Mrs. Mitchell.
Greetings, everybody.
Hello, sir.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Captain Richard Vincent.
It's so nice to meet you. Could you tell us about your life and time in World War II?
Certainly, it would be my pleasure, but to start off with a little bit of back history. I was born in New York, but I was raised here in Westfield. I grew up on some farmland on Little River Road along the Westfield River. I graduated in 1937 from this town's Westfield High School, and I later went on to graduate from the Massachusetts State College of Amherst in the year 1941 with a bachelor's degree in entomology.
Wow, you really stayed local.
I certainly did until 1940, where in my senior year of college I filled out the paperwork, and after graduation I became eligible for selective service, as I have already mentioned, and I went on to begin my active duty on May 6th with the Marine Corps in 1941.
At least you got to finish college.
I certainly did, but I didn't waste any time afterwards. I traveled to Parris Island, South Carolina for boot camp and never looked back. I was appointed to second lieutenant in April of 1942, and after that I was assigned duty to the first separate engineering company in North Carolina. A month later, I went to Washington, D.C. to marry my love, Jeanette Audrey Nightingale.
Oh, that is so exciting. And when did you first go overseas?
Well, you see, I was a platoon leader in California, and from there we set sail and traveled with the 8th Marines to support operations in the Guadalcanal campaign. From there, we suffered from relentless bites from mosquitoes and reoccurring bouts from malaria, but nevertheless we persisted. I was recognized for doing well during battles, and I was promoted in January 1st, 1943 to the first lieutenant. At around this time, we set sails for New Zealand, where we worked closely alongside the 2nd Marines to support assault troops. I myself commanded a 63-man detachment as part of the 3rd Battalion.
I can't imagine the pressure you were under as a first lieutenant.
Well, it certainly wasn't easy, but it only got worse. In the month of October in 1943, we set sail for Operation Galvanac, which was a mission to target and infiltrate islands in the Pacific Theater. It was around this time that the headquarters of the Marine Corps had promoted me to captain, but as was with the time, word was very slow to reach us as we set sail for the island of Tarawa, which was 2,500 miles southwest in the Central Pacific Ocean of Hawaii, Little did I know of my promotion while I was alive.
Wait, so what happened on the island that you never got to know of it?
Well, I'll tell you. On November 20th, 1943, the first day of the Battle of Tarawa, I led a group of men ashore and we rode landing vehicles onto the beach. Here, we were met with some of the heaviest gunfire that us Marines had to encounter during our battles across the Pacific. And it's said that 1,000 men, myself included, died on this beach.
I can't imagine what it must have felt like to be ambushed that way.
Well, it was absolutely terrible. We were all laid to rest later that day on the island, and 3 years later, the 604th Graves Quartermaster Graves Registration Company came and located our cemetery, and the 15 other men with me were identified and then brought home. I myself was never identified, so therefore, in the year 1949, I was deemed non-recoverable. My name was then etched into the Honolulu Memorial Stone tablets, which honor 28,000 men and women who lost their lives at sea or are missing in action. This memorial not only depicts World War II, but as well as Korean War and the Vietnam War. My parents had a memorial stone made for me in this cemetery in my honor, with the inscription, "We live by deeds and not by years." I was only 25 at the time of my death, but I know that my parents were proud of me.
And were your remains ever found?
Well, actually, they were. In the year 2013, a nonprofit group called History Flight had discovered the remains of my wooden casket in the same area as the other men, but in the same cemetery, but not quite the same areas. Similar, but not quite. Inside the coffin were my Marine Corps issued gear, 2 Japanese bullets, and my ID tags. The year is now 2015, and 72 years after the Battle of Tarawa, and my remains were finally brought back here to Westfield, where they could be buried in the grave that my parents had purchased for me so many years ago. At my burial service, I was awarded full military honors, and the Marine Corps even found my niece in Colorado and flew her and her family all the way over here to attend. Many veterans are not as lucky as I am, and I am considered eternally grateful.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Captain.
And thank you all for coming to honor us veterans.
We do just have a little bit more for you. Thank you for joining us today to recognize and pay tribute to these veterans. We also pay tribute to all the veterans that have served and are serving our nation. The Westfield Athenaeum has also created a display with artifacts that belong to a few of our featured veterans today. And you can visit the Athenaeum during the week to view the display. And again, also there are photos in the chapel today.
And all of the proceeds of this event will go towards the continued restoration of the cemetery's cherished Henry Lyman Parks Memorial Chapel. The chapel is open today for public viewing and to learn about its history. We hope you have time to visit it, and our friends in the chapel are ready to meet you.